Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry on innovative wood products promoting rural economies and healthy forests will come to order. Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us here today to discuss a very important topic, innovation in the wood products industry and what it means for rural prosperity and forest health. America's forests are a pillar of our country's prosperity, delivering very important environmental, social, and economic benefits. Forests deliver ecosystem services that are irreplaceable: clean air and water, carbon storage, and biodiversity. They are favored places for families and recreation enthusiasts, and in rural areas, forests create jobs and underpin local economies. My home state of Virginia understands this very well. Across Virginia's 15 million acres of forested land, forest-related businesses contribute $17 billion annually to the Commonwealth's economy and support more than 100,000 jobs. At the national level, forestry-related businesses employ nearly 3 million men and women. As it relates to wood products, the industry accounts for approximately 4% of total manufacturing GDP, producing nearly $300 billion in products annually. Yet multiple factors complicate the health of the industry. As markets have changed and evolved, demand for traditional wood products have matured or declined. Plastic, steel, and other materials have replaced products previously made exclusively from wood. The rise of digital media has significantly depressed newsprint and sheet paper production, and new residential housing, which drives strong wood markets, is now beginning to approach pre-crisis figures. With markets facing economic stagnation, the forest sector is looking to innovation to reinvigorate the industry and the future of its full possibilities. Innovative wood products have the potential to develop new markets and strengthen local economies. New markets can also provide incentives for land managers, public and private, to implement sustainable management practices that fully maximize forestry's social and environmental benefits. Recent innovations in mass timber and fiber insulation for the construction of wood buildings are already underway. These inventive products offer faster construction schedules and lower emission profiles. Researchers are also discovering new ways to use wood materials, completely changing the course of material science and engineering. An area of active research is nanotechnology. Potential applications for the use of nanocellulose include additives to create food coatings, transparent, flexible electronics, biomedical applications, among many other novel uses. These products and more like them are benefiting from federal research conducted by the Forest Products Laboratory. Innovative products that aren't even on our radar, yet will come from investment in product development through opportunities like the Wood Innovation Grant Program. These investments are vital if our nation's forests are to remain bountiful and productive for their full range of environmental, social, and economic benefits. I am grateful to hear and learn from our witnesses today on the progress of the wood products industry, federal support for these products, and to discuss the many benefits that innovation lends to forestry. In consultation with the ranking member and pursuant to the Rule 11E, I want to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today. The chair would request that members submit their opening statements for the record so witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there is ample time for questions. I would like to welcome our witnesses today. Thank you for being here. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Gorgon, Vice President of Innovation and Director of P3 Nano at the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. Michael joined the endowment in 2013 and is currently focused on taking cellulosic nanotechnology from the lab to commercialization, advancing mass timber construction, and is bringing together partners in the public and private sectors. Prior to joining the endowment, Michael served as the Executive Vice President and CEO of the Society of American Foresters. Our next witness is Ms. Jennifer Cover. Ms. Cover serves as the President and CEO of Woodworks, a nonprofit program focused on growing the market demand for wood products through project support and education. She is a California licensed professional engineer and taught timber design at the University of California, San Diego for 8 years. She holds a master's degree from the University of California, Berkeley, and her experience includes business development, market analysis, project management, and structural design, all with an emphasis on wood construction. I would now like to recognize the gentlewoman from Maine, Representative Shelley Pingree, to introduce our next and final witness.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for holding this hearing, particularly coming from the state of Maine, the most forested state in the nation, our state has been dealing with a lot of the challenges in a transition in this industry. We're really excited to have all the panelists here today. But we are particularly excited to have someone from Maine, Joshua Henry, the president and co-founder of GoLab, a building products company that's based in Belfast, Maine. Prior to co-founding GoLab, Mr. Henry served as a faculty member in the chemistry departments of Bates College and the University of Maine. He is a part of producing a very exciting insulation product that we predict someday will be in every home and every commercial building across the country. So you're all lucky to be in on the ground floor to hear more about it today. But thank you so much for taking your time, Mr. Henry, to come spend some time with us here today, and we look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
We will now proceed with hearing from our witnesses. Each of you will have 5 minutes to present testimony. When the light turns yellow, that indicates there is 1 minute remaining to complete your testimony. Mr. Gorgon, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Chair Spanberger, Ranking Member Maltha, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify on innovation in sustainable forest products. I am Michael Gorgon, Vice President for Innovation at the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. The Endowment is a non-for-profit public charity chartered at the request of the governments of the U.S. and Canada as a result of the Softwood Lumber Agreement of 2006. The Endowment is focused on keeping forests as forests and supporting communities that depend upon them. I'm focused on innovation in forest products because markets bring value to forests, and we keep things that we value. Developing new markets, displacing current technology, getting people to think differently about forest products, these are daunting challenges for the forest sector. While we have solutions that solve many of today's environmental challenges, getting them to market requires overcoming many obstacles. At the Endowment, we're finding opportunities to bring together scientists from the USDA Forest Service and the Research and Development Program, state and private forestry and the National Forest System, university researchers and the private sector to accelerate the commercial readiness of a number of the innovative forest products that we're talking about today, including mass timber construction, low-value products that utilize forest restoration materials, and one of the most exciting opportunities, cellulosic nanomaterials. We are finding incredible applications for cellulosic nanomaterials. They're made from the tiniest parts of the tree. These are a new class of materials valued for their mechanical properties, their sustainability, their large-scale production potential, and their low cost. At the nano scale, about 1/100th of the width of a human hair, and we can look at Jennifer to look what hair looks like, cellulose has really novel properties. When we get the nano scale for many materials, strange things start to happen. For example, nano gold is actually no longer that golden color. It's red or pink. In the case of cellulose, we can produce a material that is as strong as steel, but it's only 1/5 of the weight of steel. So examples include researchers at the University of Maine who are working on several innovative products. One scientist and his team are developing a replacement for gypsum board that we made from sawdust and cellulosic nanofibers that act as the binding agent. This new type of board will be lighter weight, will not have chemical additives associated with negative human health, and will have greenhouse gas emission profiles significantly lower than traditional products. Another researcher at Maine is actually developing a replacement snack package that would be fully recyclable and biodegradable. So that means no more potato chip bags in the forest, in your streams, or on the side of our roads. Researchers are investigating improvement to lithium-ion battery technology that could be theoretically double the storage capacity of lithium-ion batteries. Imagine doubling the range of current electric vehicles. And we can make those electric vehicles lighter by coating fiberglass with cellulosic nanomaterials, making that fiber stronger. That stronger fiber means we can put less of it in the car part, making those auto parts weigh about 20% less. Another interesting application for cellulosic nanomaterials involves concrete. People use 4 trillion tons of concrete worldwide. But concrete is also the source of about 5 to 8% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions because it takes a lot of energy to make concrete. To make the cement component, we actually heat limestone rocks up to about 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit, which takes, of course, a lot of energy. And of course, that produces greenhouse gas emissions. But the rock itself actually has stored carbon in it. And when we heat that rock up, that carbon gets released as well. So if we could reduce the amount of cement in concrete, we could actually have a real environmental win. And that's where cellulosic nanomaterials can actually help. When we add tiny amounts of this material to the mix, we can actually reduce the emissions from concrete by about 18 to 20%. It's interesting, concrete requires near complete hydration. The challenge being that it's not always easy to get that exactly right. What nanocellulose does is it acts like a straw when it gets into that concrete mix. I'm sure many of you have made pancakes from a mix before. You mix that pancake around, you get those dry lumps in the pancake, and they never seem to break up even though you added all that milk and eggs. Same thing happens in cement. But the nanocellulose carries the water all the way through the cement and actually hydrates all those particles, meaning we get a stronger cement. What does that mean? We can have stronger concrete, which is fantastic, or we can reduce the amount of cement in concrete, which would reduce our greenhouse gas emission profiles from that concrete. And 20% reduction may not seem like a lot, but for a 4 trillion ton product that's used worldwide, it's a significant improvement. So we are collaborating in a town in California called Wairika. It's in Northern California at the foot of Mount Shasta, and wildfire is a real threat there. So the community wants to remove the small dying and dead trees that are there that's choking the forest, but it's expensive to do. These trees have little to no commercial value and they can't pay their way out of the woods. Cellulosic nanomaterials are emerging as a new market for low-value wood, a market that will make it economical to improve forest health, protect that town, and create jobs. Together, we're going to put the world's first concrete-enhanced nanomaterial bridge in Wairika this spring. The town is going to help us out, and together we're going to build a better infrastructure, a better community, and a cleaner, greener world. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Gorgon. We appreciate your comments. Ms. Cover, you may begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Spanberger, Ranking Member LaMaffa, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to testify about innovative wood products. I'd like to start by thanking the committee for enacting the Timber Innovation Act in the 2018 Farm Bill. As mentioned in the introduction, I lead the Woodworks program, which is a nonprofit entity that removes barriers to wood utilization in commercial construction. We have provided assistance on about 700 mass timber projects that have utilized mass timber for some aspect of their design. And we've done this for no cost because we're a nonprofit entity. We also provide about 300 educational opportunities throughout the U.S. annually, which helps architects and engineers become more familiar with designing with this type of material. Woodworks is a true public-private partnership in that industry funding matches government funding at about a 3-to-1 ratio. Our primary industry funder is the Softwood Lumber Board, an agricultural checkoff program, and our primary government funder is the U.S. Forest Service. Chief Christensen has been a huge key supporter of the Woodworks program, and together we've accomplished some amazing things, including opening up an entire new market for wood products in blast resistance design. So I'd like to draw your attention today to the importance of supporting the use of innovative wood products in the built environment. Let's start with what these products are. So mass timber products are large structural panel members that can be 30 to 60 foot in length. So for example, a floor system that can be just dropped right into place on a construction site. And these materials are made up of much smaller diameter materials, whether it's veneer or 2x or 1x, that are built up, and those typically come from smaller diameter trees. And that's really where the win-win situation comes from in terms of forest health and end-use construction benefits. So why are these products important? First, from a forest health perspective, mass timber has the ability to change the conversation around landscape restoration efforts. Mass timber can help keep our private lands forested because it creates a new, sort of a brand new market that is high value for the materials coming off of our forests. Additionally, in our public lands, it creates a new opportunity that's an economical driver to help increase the cost recovery for the Forest Service on their restoration projects. Additionally, mass timber manufacturing will create new high-tech jobs in these rural communities, and this could really change the face of some of these communities. These manufacturing facilities will offer opportunities such as computer and software engineering related to CAD and building information modeling, and that provides opportunities that aren't typically in these type of areas. Another significant benefit of building with mass timber is the carbon sequestration attributes of the material. I've included an example in the testimony packet here today of the 87,000 square foot building on the campus of UMass Amherst. And on this project, we calculated the carbon impact of using innovative wood products instead of alternative, more fossil fuel intensive materials. And we found that it was equivalent of being able to pull over 500 cars off the road for an entire year. So if we think about this at scale, this is one building, and taking this to scale, it's really quite impressive what the impact could be. I've touched on the clear tangible benefits to our society, the improved forest health, the carbon reduction in our atmosphere, as well as increased and better jobs for rural communities. But what's driving the uptake of mass timber in the marketplace is really the benefits from the design community's perspective. And this includes the renewability of the material, the aesthetic appeal, the speed of construction, being the three main ones. And the opportunity that we're looking at is about 17,000 projects are built every year in the US that do not utilize wood construction. But there's really no code limitation on those buildings. Those buildings could be wood by the building code requirements. The only thing really keeping these buildings from being built in wood is perception and education. Mass timber is relatively new in the US, but internationally this is not a new material. It's been around for 30 years. One manufacturer in Europe had told us that last year alone they supplied 500 projects with cross-laminated timber. And to put it in perspective, here in the US, we had 38 projects go to construction utilizing cross-laminated timber last year. So we are just at the very beginning of this building revolution here in this country. Woodworks has been working hard to identify and resolve hurdles to market adoption, and having the support of the Agricultural Checkoff Program and the U.S. Forest Service has been really critical to our success. In conclusion, I would love to see our legislative leaders commit to a more sustainable built environment. I'd like to ask each of you to consider taking the lead by building government structures in your state using mass timber. And Woodworks will be there as a resource to help those design teams along at no cost. So thank you for your time and consideration this morning.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cover. Mr. Henry, please proceed with your testimony.
Chair Spanberger, Ranking Member LaMalfa, and members of the committee, I'm grateful for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the key role of innovative wood products can play in strengthening rural economies and promoting healthy forest management. My name is Joshua Henry. I'm a materials chemist and the president of Go Lab, a building products company based in Belfast, Maine. Next year, our company will become the first in North America to manufacture a recyclable, renewable, non-toxic construction insulation made from softwood residuals, the byproduct of lumber production. I'm thrilled to be here because I think our story is one that is going to need to become more common if rural communities and economies are going to be able to succeed. Go Lab started over 4 years ago when my business partner, Matt O'Malia, and I realized that there was a suite of construction insulation products in Europe made from softwood fiber that were doing roughly $600 million in annual revenue and yet not being manufactured anywhere in North America. The realization was both interesting and confusing to us because the technology to manufacture these products had been around for over 20 years and had resulted in a renewable, recyclable, and non-toxic insulation that, from a performance and application standpoint, was a great fit for the North American building market. Matt and I did not intend to become manufacturers. At the time, I was a professor in the chemistry department at the University of Maine. Matt, an architect, had founded a company that designed and built the first certified passive house in Maine, 12th in the United States, and has since grown exponentially and achieved national prominence in the field of energy-efficient building design and construction. We just wanted to answer one question. Why had these products, which are both cost and logistically prohibitive to import, never been manufactured in North America? I'm here talking to you today because there is no good answer to this question. In fact, what we have found out is that due to the cost of energy, raw materials, and labor in the United States, this suite of products can be manufactured and distributed here at a lower cost relative to Europe, and more importantly, can be cost competitive with all of the other construction installations on the US market. That revelation led me to, somewhat prematurely, quit my job in academia and focus on bringing the technology to manufacture these products to the United States. The other substantial motivator was the challenging situation that has transpired over the last 4 years in Maine's forest products industry. During this time, 6 paper mills have closed, and over 5,000 jobs have been lost, resulting in $1.5 billion in reduced economic impact in this sector. Maine is the most forested state in the country, and our forests are our greatest natural resource, and they're also a large part of our identity as a state. And Matt and I felt like we had a meaningful, achievable concept for bringing new economic opportunity, jobs, and sustainability to this critical industry. That was 3 years ago. Today, the demolition and renovation phase of GoLab's first U.S. manufacturing facility in one of those closed paper mills, the former UPM facility in Madison, Maine, is underway. And at this time next year, that facility will be manufacturing the first of 3 wood fiber insulation composites. We have gotten to this point thanks to a substantial private equity raise, robust support from Maine's Department of Economic and Community Development, and grants from both the Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Forest Service. That support has allowed us to employ many of the top manufacturing personnel from that mill. Once up and running, our operation in Madison will employ more than 120 people, generate over $100 million in revenue, and will have introduced a new value-added manufactured forest product to the nation that will inevitably result in future plants in rural communities across the United States. In closing, I should note that our success, unfortunately, is not the norm. While there are many reasons for this, 2 have particularly stood out as an obstacle to attracting the investment that meaningful projects like ours require. The first is the migration of our nation's economy away from manufacturing. The second is the increased concentration of wealth in the hands of very few. While I could probably write you a treatise on each topic, I will simply note that both factors have the same effect: to diminish the pool of qualified investors that have the capacity, understanding, and interest in unleashing the dormant economic potential of our rural communities. Thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Thank you very much for your testimony. This is such an incredibly exciting topic, and I'm grateful for you all being present here today. Members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority for members who were here at the start of the hearing, and after that, members will be recognized in order of arrival. Okay. I will begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. I am so excited to be holding this hearing today, and I thank you all for your enthusiasm on what I think to be a really fascinating topic. Mr. Gorgon, I'd like to start with you because in my notes, when you were talking, I was really just tremendously impressed by the possibility that exists when we're looking at cellulose technology. I am a mother of 3 children, and when you mentioned snack packs and replacements for snack packs, you might not have been able to see it from here, but my eyes lit up. So I'm excited about that possibility. But I was wondering if you could speak at a little bit more length about 2 things. First, specific to my district and my state, we've talked about innovative wood products and how they can make more forest types economical. One of the most abundant tree species in my home state of Virginia is the yellow poplar. And while this tree species has many desirable traits, the market for hardwoods isn't as robust as some softwoods. Can you discuss some of the ways that nanotechnology could expand potentially options for hardwoods in places like Virginia? First portion of my question. And then my second is, could you dive in a little bit more about what you, the growth that you all are pursuing in Winnetka, California?
Sure. So thanks for the question. And I'm concerned about snack packaging too for my kids, both in terms of the impact on the world, but also the plastics that are in those containers that actually can transfer into the food as well. And so, those are the kinds of solutions that we're offering, and it's pretty exciting. When we look at yellow poplar as a potential source for nanocellulose, the great news is nanocellulose can be made from any material. It doesn't matter. We can make it from any tree species that's out there. So there's a huge window for us. And what's really interesting, too, is
And has there been research in all different tree species at this point?
Yep.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we've looked at hardwood, we've looked at western woods. We've actually, typically the easiest method to make nanocellulose is from paper. And you have paper manufacturing, of course, in Virginia. But we can actually make it from raw wood as well, which we have demonstrated.
And can you make it from recycled paper or previously
Yes.
utilized paper? Okay.
Yep. And we've done that on, again, in this project in Wairika, California. I'm glad you asked about Wairika. What's really interesting there is what we've done is we've looked at the forest in California, and we've said, there's a huge problem here. There's no market for a lot of these materials. They're really low value. Can we take raw wood from Wairika and turn it into nanocellulose? We did that. And we actually used some recycled fiber in combination with that as well, so we could demonstrate all those things at once. And what we're trying to do there is we're actually building a bridge deck that's completely made from nanocellulose. We've done it, we've made the deck, we just need to install it in, we're waiting for the
And when you're talking about bridge deck, you're talking about the actual bridge that cars and people would cross.
This is the full deck that people will drive over. In fact, actually, it's a logging road, so logging trucks will drive over it. So it's kind of a nice symbol for sure. But what's exciting about it is the whole community is behind this effort as well. They're really committed to trying to utilize that forest, figure out ways that they can bring real value to their town. And so not only are they excited about that particular bridge deck that we're going to put in for them, we're actually building a facility at their baseball field so that parents can actually sit at their baseball games and sit on a concrete pad as opposed to sitting on the ground or whatever. And they're going to build that with us out of cellulosic nanomaterial enhanced concrete. A really exciting project. We're really excited to be part of it. And the whole effort is designed to do exactly what we're talking about today. How can we get more forest products into all kinds of applications that really matter and can reduce the environmental footprint that we have in the world right now? And products like mass timber and some of the things that we're talking about with cellulosic nanomaterials can actually do that.
And from your experiences, can you discuss the importance of federal support plays in the development of these products? And I'll open it to all of you to comment on that.
There is no way that we would be where we are right now without the support of the USDA Forest Service. And we often talk about how, there's all these exciting new products that are coming to the market, and they're always 5 years out, right? And then 5 years comes around, and it's still 5 years out. Well, the work that we're doing, because we have the support of the Forest Service, we have grade A scientists that are doing this work. They have a pilot facility at the Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin that's making this material in quantities that we can actually use it in that 4 trillion ton concrete industry. They're right there with us doing this work together. Without that government support, there's no way we'd be there. And of course, without the private sector, we wouldn't be there as well. It's that marriage between us, that all of us working together, we can actually take those steps forward. If we had more time, I'd talk about what we're doing with FDA and how we're bringing companies together to actually solve that problem there as well. Exciting opportunities for the future, and it's only because of the collaboration between government and the private sector and university researchers.
Thank you. And Ms. Cover and Mr. Henry, in the second round, we'll come back to you. But briefly, you would agree with his assertion that the federal support is necessary?
Oh, definitely. The U.S. Forest Service has been an incredible partner on our journey. We would not be able to accomplish what we have done, both from an education perspective with the architects and the engineers, developers, general contractors, but also just on the way we've been able to open markets that were just previously not available to wood at all.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yes, I would say we received a Wood Innovations Grant from the U.S. Forest Service last year, a federal grant from the EPA SBIR development program. We're working on the Wood Innovations Program with Woodworks on adoption and code issues associated with our products. So it's been extremely helpful in bringing a new product to market.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Allen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your insight this morning. I come from the construction world. I was in the construction business for 40 years, and before being a member of Congress. From the standpoint of government involvement, most of the building codes are written by the government agencies. What progress have you made there on getting your products introduced? And of course, from a code standpoint, you got to meet certain requirements. And then also, the architects and the engineers are the folks that do the design work in the construction industry. So give me some background on your progress, and I'll just give that question to all three, and how your product is being developed, because we do need to keep this free market. Price obviously has something to do with it as well, and you're competing with steel and concrete, so give me your sales pitch on that as well.
All right, sorry if I go first. So on this topic, in terms of codes, there's been extensive development on the code front. So in the 2015 IBC cross-laminated timber, mass timber has been included actually in the body of the code. And then in the 2021 code, you'll be seeing an adjustment for tall wood. So it will allow up to 18 stories with mass timber construction in the built environment. That'll be nationwide, yes. And so as the various jurisdictions accept the code, that's when it will come into place in each area of the country. So there's a number of jurisdictions that are already pre-adopting it because engineers and architects are so excited to start moving forward with this building opportunity. So we're providing assistance on over 70 projects right now that are over the current code limitations in the height. So there's already extreme excitement before the code is even fully adopted. So that's been really exciting to watch. Addition in terms of progress being made, WoodWorks educates. We provide over 300 education opportunities a year, and that allows us to award about 46,000 practitioner education hours every single year. So it's incredible the number of people that we're touching, again, thanks to the support of the Forest Service. And then in terms of cost and projects, since you come from the construction background, one of the things to note is that mass timber tends to be 20 to 30% faster to construct than alternate materials. And right now, if you look at just direct costs, there is a range. So it's anywhere from 5% less than traditional materials up to 10% premium to go with a mass timber solution. That's for direct costs only. And the difference that you see there is generally due to whether or not the building was originally designed in mass timber. There's a lot of efficiencies that can be found if the building is set out with how you do your column lines, how you lay out your spans, based on the panel size themselves.
Do you have span limitations more so than steel and concrete?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think it depends on the loads that you're looking at for the particular building you're designing.
I'm sorry, we're getting in the weeds here, but
It does, I mean, there are limitations, and the column lines, depending on the loads that you're dealing with, might be slightly closer, but what we find is with exposed wood, it has a much more open feel. So in a lot of these office spaces, even if the column line is maybe 3 feet less than it would be if it was a concrete column or a steel column, the room itself feels very open, and so there's a huge driver there. So on the cost, the one other thing just to keep in mind is that additionally, you have to look at the value. So you've got the speed of construction is much quicker, so there's savings there in cost in terms of construction loans, and you're also able to rent the buildings out quicker and generally at a premium. So when a developer's analyzing this, they really look at the value, the overall value to the owner.
comments from?
So I would just add to that we come at it from the free market side. We have a design construction business. We built more CLT buildings than any firm in the state of Maine. And we recently completed a building in Connecticut that went up in 3 days. So it gives you an idea of how this technology, the CLT.
You talking about the structure?
It was a residential structure.
I got you, okay.
But the on-site construction of that building went up very quickly. It was a great success. Also used all wood fiber insulation. Unfortunately imported from Europe. As far as codes go, this product has been existent in Europe for over 20 years, as I said in my testimony. We know what the code challenges are for insulation manufacturers. The challenge is really code adoption. Okay. And so advancing this sort of product and sort of wood products in general, I would say dimensional lumber manufacturing, it's important for us for districts, that code adoption, which happens on the state level, to keep pace with the publishing of new codes.
Okay, we'll continue. I guess we're going to do a second round. Okay, I'll continue. We'll continue this discussion on the second round, but I need to yield back. Thank you.
Perfect. I'd like to welcome Chairman Peterson of the full Ag Committee, who's just joined us, and we'll continue with questions from my colleague from Arizona. Mr. O'Halloran is recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Spangler. Today's hearing focuses on an issue of great importance to Northern Arizona. I am looking forward to discussing innovative forest products. These products are instrumental in building a restoration economy that provides sustainable jobs and improves forest health. The district I represent, Arizona's 1st Congressional District, includes all or part of 6 national forests, each of which is filled with ecological beauty. They play an important role in Arizona's rural communities and our state's water supply. I have actively supported forest restoration policies for over 20 years. While in the Arizona legislature, I co-chaired the Governor's Forest Health Oversight Council. Together, we produced a report with recommendations for stakeholders, local governments, the state, and Congress to maintain forest health and prevent natural disasters. Today, the U.S. Forest Service's Forestry initiative is the largest restoration effort in our nation. It serves as a testbed for innovation in forest management and efficiency development. Identifying a valuable use for biomass and low-value, small-diameter ponderosa pine remains the major issue to the success of forestry and the establishment of a sustainable restoration economy. I remain optimistic that creative minds will develop, such as yours, efficient and sustainable uses for biomass and small-diameter ponderosa pine, so we can reduce the fire risk of Arizona's forest and improve the health of Arizona's watersheds. Ms. Clover, I heard that when I was out in the meeting here, I heard that you mentioned ponderosa pine, so I'm heading towards you for my first question. You know, it burns through forest fires. We burn it in biomass. We try to find products that we ship it, and that's just beginning. There's so much we do with it, but as you know, it's a product that has its problems. So I'd like to hear your evaluation of what we can do.
That's a great question. Thank you very much. The manufacturing standard for CLT is called PRG 320, and it is set up to allow for innovation so that it's not limited to any specific species. So currently in the U.S., we do have certain species that are more typical. So you have Douglas fir larch, spruce pine fir, and southern pine as your more typical species used in CLT, but it's not limited to those. There's only a few limitations in terms of the way it is graded that will limit what materials can be used. So I am aware of one manufacturer that's already started to test ponderosa pine for use in CLT, and they're seeing really positive results. So assuming that that advancement moves forward, it'd be a great opportunity for ponderosa pine in CLT materials.
Along those same lines, you know, we've been trying to find those particular types of people. I'm going to send our people to you to
Great.
do some further investigation. But can you identify any specific areas that you think are the most important for us to pinpoint and identify for use? Because this is just millions and millions and millions of acres. And we have a density issue within the environment. We have distance issues as far as cost goes. And so we're trying to identify how we're going to reach those levels of need in order to get that forest clear as far as being able to save it.
Yeah, so we started to have some conversations with Chief Christensen in regards to what are some opportunities to connect these materials to the manufacturing facilities. That goes a little bit beyond of what Woodward's expertise is. You know, we do the education and try to grow the market demand, but we are looking at ways that we can support the Forest Service in that effort to try to find that solution. I think as soon as we get the certification where it can be utilized in the material, then hopefully the market demand will drive it. And that will help in some of the increasing the cost recovery efforts in trying to get the material off the forest land and into these products. So we're trying to work on the demand side and get it to the point where it's certified and able to be used. And then hopefully then that will help drive to make those connections.
And for the other two panelists, I'd like your opinion on if the Forest Service has come to you and tried to identify the challenges of ponderosa pine.
So I would just say that the technology that we're bringing to the U.S. market, Mr. Allen talked about market solutions. This is so far as our testing has been done, this is a softwood species that is species agnostic in terms of the technology and the implementation. So we look forward to our second plant in Arizona. I would just say that in terms of a market solution that we've tried to bring to Maine with our challenges is what really is needed for driving people to go into the woods, which is a challenge in Arizona as much as it is a challenge in Maine to harvest that wood. You need value-added products. The importance of this meeting here today is to drive products that are more than just dimensional lumber that have such thin margins.
My time is over, and I yield back. Thank you.
I now recognize my colleague from California, Mr. LaMalfa, for 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
And the ranking member.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. This is a great topic today. Appreciate the panelists here. We, of course, have a lot of challenges with the whole forestry issue, especially in the West, in my home state of California, where it seems like if we're not burning 500,000 acres in a year, then we're having a light year. And at the same time, as a country, we're the #2 importer of wood products. I'm just going, what are we doing? So the cross-laminated timber, that is an exciting technology. We can move forward and move more and more into non-traditional thought on construction. I know that we're going to have some perceptions with perhaps with the regulatory side, with the construction side, with certifications. So I'd like to hear this a little more from the panel on that. Also, a product called Biochar. We've heard a little bit about that over the years, but it seems like that there's just a lot of potential there. So bottom line for me is that more material we're getting out of the woods into some type of positive use. And as Mr. Georgian was talking about up there in Wairika, which is my home area, as you know. By the way, this is really exciting that we can change the terminology from Eureka whenever there's an invention made to Wairika, I have found it. So Eureka's on the coast, Wairika is in the upper central part by Oregon there. So let's get more Wairika going here. So anyway, I appreciate that. The situation of replacing steel and concrete more and more, how's that going to be met by, again, Mr. Allen was kind of talking about code enforcement, engineers, accepted, how long will that take to become an accepted, certified part of building code, for example? So, Mr. George, and then all three panelists.
On the code issues, I think Jennifer might be best to start.
Okay.
Perfect. So in terms of codes, it's been accepted. So it's already in the 2015 building code. So it's been accepted and mass timber's called out in that building code.
How tall of a building are we
That's
talking?
within current code limits, which is 85 feet.
85 feet?
Yeah.
What's that in stories for us?
6 to 7 stories.
Yep, okay,
But then with the 2021 code,
yep.
the adoption of that will go up to 18 stories. And California is one of the states that is looking at early adoption.
Okay. Now, a question that's going to come up, and I'm sorry to bring it up, is, you know, every picture of an old building you've seen from 1880, 1890 isn't around anymore because always the story is there was a fire. And so what are we building, what can you build into this for fireproofing or at least a higher level of fire resistance? Because, again, maybe it's an unfair question, but it's one that's going to be out there on the table by general public.
It's a very fair question. No, I'm happy to address it. So really what is exciting about what took place with the testing and the research in order to go taller with wood is there was extensive requirements on the fire side in terms of fire safety testing. So with the acceptance of these new code requirements, you have a much higher level of safety than is required historically on a lot of the different construction practices. So one of the things was done was a 2-story apartment building was built and 5 different tests were done. It was fully loaded so that you were simulating as if it was an 18-story building, and it performed exceptionally well. A 5-ply CLT panel in one of those tests was exposed to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in the fire. It lasted for 3 hours and 6 minutes, which is much longer than the 2-hour code requirement. So the results have been phenomenal. Mass timber burns differently than traditional wood materials, and that's why you can go taller with it, because it actually chars and then it protects that wood against further heat damage. So if you think about when you're camping, you try to hold a lighter to a giant log, it won't ignite. So that is the idea here, is that it self-extinguishes because it creates a char layer once it does burn and it protects itself.
Okay, thank you. Also, please, panelists, on what I'm looking at too is we have just has been mentioned here, an overloading of material in our forests, much more density. And the market isn't always there for some of the lesser products. That's what's exciting about some of this, too. Do we see that we're going to use what's already coming out of the forest more intensely, or does this mean that we're actually going to be going in and getting a bigger net of all tree material, whether it's the less marketable stuff, less usable, or saw logs in conjunction with that? Are we going to get a net increase of material coming out of the forest?
Yeah, I hope the answer to that question is both, right? So that we're better utilizing what we're already harvesting, and we're harvesting more, especially that problematic restoration requirement material that we need to remove from our forests. There is such a gigantic backlog of material that needs to be removed, and having markets to address that removal is critical to it. Mr. O'Halloran mentioned this from northern Arizona. You've lost so many mills in that area. When we lose the mill infrastructure, we lose the loggers, we lose all sorts of different parts of the system, and then we can't remove that material. So these products are going to be able to help us restore the market pull that is going to help us actually manage those forests and remove more material from them over time.
So you believe that that's an unknown right now, really, then?
It's unknown to some extent, but I'm very bully on it. I think it is absolutely going to increase the amount of wood that we're removing from forests.
Thank you. I'll come back in the second round. Appreciate it.
The chair now recognizes my colleague from Maine, Ms. Pingree.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. All of your testimony and questions answered have been really interesting, and we greatly appreciate having you here today. I think I'll start with my hometown visitor. I think because so many of us represent rural communities, we have a really good understanding of what happens when manufacturing jobs are lost. And when you lose an entire sector, as you mentioned, 4 mills in 6 years, that's staggering in a state of 1.3 million people, especially in the most forested state in the nation. So we were just such a heavily dependent state on forest products. And so really all of what you've been talking today has been really exciting in Maine as some of these opportunities are opening up to us. Getting them from great idea, university research, to the end stage of manufacturing, as all of you have attested, is really complicated. But, perhaps, Mr. Henry, you could just talk a little bit more about the project you're doing in Madison, a town of 5,000 people, and the impact this could have, and maybe some of the challenges of getting it to the stage of actually producing the materials next year.
Yes, thank you. As Mr. Gorgon mentioned, when something as traumatic as what happened in Maine over the last 4 years happened, the critically important thing, urgency to act at that point, is to maintain that infrastructure. There are people whose jobs, whose livelihoods, depend on that industry, and it is not a simple thing to just bring that back. Once it is gone, it's a much bigger investment to rebuild that infrastructure. That infrastructure dies because there are not value-added products that can enter the market effectively and support that manufacturing infrastructure. That's why what we're talking about today is so important, is having innovative products that have the value add that allows them to enter new markets and incentivize the investment in manufacturing infrastructure. That, as I mentioned in my testimony, I can speak directly to the challenge of getting investment into the manufacturing infrastructure and how difficult that is. But having value-added products, having the whole stream of support that you're seeing here today is absolutely vital. The support for the government for research and development to develop those products and find new markets, that is what is necessary. If you want to solve problems like the challenge that you have in California or Arizona, there needs to be new products that enter new markets for wood products. Otherwise, you're not building that new infrastructure. The project in Madison has been immensely gratifying to everyone on our team. The work that we've done with the community of Madison to bring that back, we've re-employed a number of the people who worked at that mill in designing the project. They have real ownership on a literal basis of our company in bringing that project together, and the state has really galvanized behind this project to make it happen, because they realize the critical need to act quickly when something like this happens. So we just immensely value the work that you do in terms of bringing the funding to these projects and the work that all of my committee, my fellow testifiers here today do as well.
I'll get a chance, we're going to have a second round too. So I'm just going to follow up, and I'll ask the other guys questions later. But I want to reinforce what my colleagues have said and that you did. I mean, one of the things we hear about a lot is this whole issue of both losing the infrastructure once the facilities are turned into something else or they're demolished, which has happened with some of them. You don't have that plant to rehabilitate and bring back the jobs. Also, the skills and training. It's not everybody who wants to work in the woods. These are dangerous jobs. It takes a lot of training. It's expensive equipment to harvest wood today. The people who drive the trucks, you know, every stage of the way we hear about labor shortages and the challenges that are already coming up. So I think having a sense of urgency about how quickly we need to move on this isn't something we can, you know, kind of wait out into the future. I thought since the ranking member mentioned it, it would be interesting for you to talk a little bit about it. It's counterintuitive to think about an insulation material that's made out of wood products because, again, people think about fireproofing and how it even works. So could you just describe that a little bit and how and why it's going to be safe?
Sure. So this is a suite of insulation products. One of the exciting things is that it addresses all phases of the built infrastructure: interior insulation, exterior insulation. The bat product is a direct replacement for fiberglass. The board is a direct replacement for foam. These products, the board, for example, has a better fire rating than foam does. People have a perception of wood as being dangerous from a fire perspective. But if you talk to any firefighter, they would prefer a residential constructed house made of entirely foam. The danger of fire to firefighters is really the outgassing of non-organic material to them. So really, it depends on what you're looking at, but our products meet all of the safety code ratings for residential construction and small, multifamily construction. There's no issue there. As CLT has faced, it's a perception issue. It's not a reality issue.
Great. My time is out, but thank you so much.
The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Washington, Congresswoman Schreier, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are really interesting questions. Thank you for all being here today. My question really, I think, is very similar to Mr. LaMalfa's because we have, in many ways, similar districts. Washington State has this tricky combination of overgrown forest, too much fuel, potential for these massive fires, a desire for cross-laminated timber, and a real market for it now that I think we can build up to 18 stories. But we also have this crumbling infrastructure without mills, small diameter mills, and even the notion that even if we could do this and mill this locally, the transportation makes costs prohibitive. So we have this kind of a forest health crisis coupled with the lack of mills, and I wanted to just paint a picture, which is that the state of Washington has been losing mill infrastructure over the past few decades. A recent report from the Washington Department of Natural Resources showed that between 2006 and 2016, the number of mills in my state declined from 137 to 88, down 36%. And in central Washington in particular, we have a really big gap in wood products infrastructure, and we also have about a 30% higher cost of construction that could be solved if we had local cross-laminated timber. In my district, forest landowners often have to truck their logs 150 miles or more to the nearest mill, making it impractical, increases cost, et cetera. And so I'm excited that we have companies in Washington State producing these innovative wood products, and I'm excited to hear about the ones you talked about today. We have 2 new facilities doing cross-laminated timber in Spokane and in Colville. And I'm wondering, looking at the practicalities here, wanting the smaller diameter trees pulled from our forests, looking that we need these small diameter mills, and looking that we need private industry to kind of partner with forestry. I was wondering if you have examples of partnerships between the U.S. Forest Service and private industry to fill these gaps. Whoever would like to answer that question.
Sure. Yes, we work with the U.S. Forest Service we received a Wood Innovations grant. We work intimately. Maine is a state in which most of the lands are privately owned. but we work intimately with dimensional lumber manufacturers. This is a technology that is totally complementary to CLT manufacturing, to dimensional lumber manufacturing. We use the residuals of softwood lumber production for our product. And I'm getting a little off target for what you're looking for, but you touched on a very key issue, which is transportation. We need to create sufficient markets for the investment in mill infrastructure. If you don't have the market there, it doesn't matter, well, nothing matters. If you don't have the market to sell the product, you can't invest, full stop. And so code, I would say, I don't know if my fellow members here would agree, but from our perspective, code is essential to creating that market for an insulation product, keeping up with code. And, you know, from the IECC energy code, that really creates, it does two goods, which is it supports the wood products industry. It also supports energy independence for our country. The built infrastructure uses about 30% of the energy that we use as a society. If we were to all implement code up to 2018 to 2021 code, that would be a huge boon to the insulation industry. And this market, this suite of products is a perfect fit for our 100% wood frame construction residential market.
Let me tell you a quick story, too, about the Forest Service and working with partners in Washington State. The Colville National Forest, where Vaughan Brothers Timber, and I'm sure you know them very well, there's a collaborative there that is working on solving some of the restoration challenges in that area. They're saying, we've got to reduce these risks. This is environmentalists working with industry, working with a whole bunch of different folks, all coming together to try to solve these problems. And the Forest Service doesn't always have the funding that's necessary to conduct the environmental analysis that needs to be done, the archaeological studies that need to be done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this collaborative actually found ways, I don't know if they were doing bake sales for forestry or what they were doing, but they found ways to gather money together and pay for some of that upfront cost of the environmental analysis that was necessary to harvest timber to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire. They raised that money. The Forest Service went through the process. The Forest Service still made the decision, but the community came together, paid for the analysis, paid for the ideas behind it, reduced the cost to the government in some ways. They sold that timber. That timber actually paid for all the cost of that upfront analysis. At the end of the day, they reduced the fire risk, and that's an effective partnership between the Forest Service, the community, and industry. And we need to replicate that 1,000 times throughout this country, and we'll start to solve some of these challenges.
Thank you so much, and thank you for pointing that out.
We'll now begin a second round of questions, and I will begin by yielding myself 5 minutes for the first question. Mr. Henry, I appreciate the distinction that you and others have made between embodied carbon in the manufacturing process of materials used in constructing a building versus the operational carbon emissions once a building is in use. It's estimated that roughly 11% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from building materials and construction, and that the other 28% comes from the building operations. Can you explain why tackling the operational carbon emissions is also critical to reducing the emissions of the built environment? And how can innovative wood fiber insulation products like those made by Go Labs help to effectively reduce the carbon footprints of buildings?
Yes, so thanks for drawing the distinction. There is energy expended in the manufacturing, obviously, of all building products, and there is energy used in heating these buildings and all of our built infrastructure. When it comes to operational energy, we're sort of experts in that. My partner, Matt O'Malia, started this firm 10 years ago in 2008 at that great time for the building construction industry that focused on ultra energy efficient design and construction that could reduce energy consumption by 90%.
Wow.
I think it's important to point that out because, you know, that 30% of energy consumption that we use as a society, everyone wants to talk about self-driving cars and battery technologies and things like that. That is a technology that could be implemented today to reduce our environmental footprint on society, but it has to be done very carefully. You see in the building industry an increasing push towards tighter buildings, so buildings that have significant air sealing components to it, significant amounts of insulation. But it's important to recognize that that's a living environment that we're not just trying to reduce energy consumption, people have to actually live in those buildings. So there's actually not just energy flow, but mass flow through those systems as well. We shower in those buildings, we cook in those buildings, we produce a lot of moisture, and that moisture has to be breathing through those buildings. What's very unique about wood fiber insulation is that it transmits moisture better than any insulation product out there on the market today. You see with increasing building code, foam products being strapped to the exterior of wood frame insulation buildings. In our opinion, that's a horrible idea. You're basically wrapping a building in cellophane, and that means that those are zero perm products, which means that they don't breathe at all. That moisture is going to get trapped up against that wood. It's going to contribute to mold and rot of our buildings, so the endurance of buildings is less. It's a little bit counterintuitive to think of. We think of wood products manufacturing as an old industry, but these products are really the Gore-Tex, the future of a building industry. They allow that product, just like you used to have these rubber rain jackets and you run outside and you start sweating and you're wetter on the inside than you would have been on the outside. Gore-Tex allows you to move outside and not trap moisture on the inside. That's what these materials are able to do.
Thank you for that explanation. I'd like to bring it back for the remainder of my time to my district. I represent a Central Virginia district. We are 10 counties in total, majority landmass rural, forested land included, but we have growing suburbs. And in the suburbs, the area of town where I grew up used to be farmland. Now there's neighborhoods everywhere. My question for you is what, and I'll start with Mr. Henry, Ms. Cover, and Mr. Gorgon, you can join in as well. What's your vision for where these are being applied? Do you have a vision for this being, in these suburban neighborhoods that are popping up and growing 100, 200, 1,000 homes at a time that we're using these technologies, or are we still focusing an individual house construction by interested parties and potentially large building structure by a developer who wants to use these technology? Where do you see this going, and where would you love to see it in 5 years?
I have 2 daughters under 2 years old. If I thought this was a niche product that we were bringing to market, I would not have quit my job. We fully expect this to be a billion-dollar product and a mainstream product for the United States. It uses the residual products that the wood products industry needs to use to motivate getting people into the woods to harvest those products that are such a danger in terms of forest fire risk and things of that nature. So I absolutely think this is going to be in every home, as you mentioned, across the nation. We anticipate it all be Go Lab product. So.
Yes, for mass timber, I would say the market is a slightly different focus in terms of it could be used in residential construction, but I think, as we were talking before, in terms of the cost, where you're going to find it most cost effective is going to be in the commercial market. And when I mentioned the 17,000 buildings annually earlier, that's a commercial market. That is not residential. And where it'll be, I think the sweet spot where it will work out for mass timber is likely going to be in that 7 to 18 story range. That's where right now there isn't a cost-effective solution when it comes to cost per square footage. So if you're going to go, if you look at our urban environments, you typically see that dichotomy of buildings that maybe cap out at 6 stories that are light frame construction, and then you get to 20 to 50 plus stories of steel or concrete, because typically the alternate materials don't become cost-effective until at 20 stories. So now you have this gap from 7 to 18 stories that now mass timber can fill. So I think that'll end up being, when we talk about costs, most likely where it'll be most cost-effective.
Thank you very much. I will now yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. LaMalfa, for a second round of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just coming back to the usage of more and more biomass. We also, in my south of Wairika here, in the area of Paradise, California, you've all heard of the situation there where there's just still hundreds of thousands of trees to be disposed of that are going to be a hazard, either they're falling over or fire hazard in the future. One group is looking at creating a pelletized fuel product in order to further the restoration going on from the campfire in the Paradise, Magalia, and surrounding areas up there. what do you think of that, panelists, of that as part of a solution on usage of these materials, you know, partially burned, partially charred timber, et cetera?
Yeah, the good news is that we can make these pelletized wood fuels from really low-value materials, and I think that's a terrific option for us in some places. The problem is cost, right? Always. When you're competing with other fossil fuels, it's very difficult to make wood energy cost-effective, but there are solutions. This one right here is actually torrefied wood. So this is wood that we've actually roasted in a low-oxygen environment, and it turns into a black powder.
Is that basically biochar or something close?
It's very similar to biochar. We can actually make biochar, or we can make this pelletized fuel. We actually have a facility going in John Day, Oregon right now. It's going to start up in the spring. This product, what's interesting about it is it turns into this black powder, or we could make biochar from it. And what we can do is densify it. And we actually fueled a coal-fired power plant for 12 straight hours using a forest biomass product just like this. That plant required no changes whatsoever. So basically what we did was we said, here's a coal-fired power plant that's going to be decommissioned by the state because Oregon doesn't want coal-fired power anymore. We can use a wood product that has a huge environmental footprint throughout the entire West, and we can fuel it with this material. It's a really exciting project. It's a demonstration project that we've got right now, but there are so many utilities across the world that are interested in this.
And I bet you can't wait to tell me what the difference of emissions are from the coal versus that.
I mean, you know, actually, it depends on how you do the calculations and it depends on who you talk to, but I mean, you know, this is a very low carbon intensity fuel because it's a waste product, right?
What about other emissions? I mean, just percentages, you know,
There's
concerns with coal versus that.
There's no mercury, there's no SO2, you know, it is a very, very clean fuel compared to any fossil fuel that's out there. And the other thing that's exciting about it is that
Because Arizona has a big problem. I think they're getting ready to close a plant, if they haven't already, a large coal plant down that way.
Oh, they're slated all over the West right now.
Yeah,
guys.
many of
absolutely.
them.
I mean, California is like the giant sucking sound in the evening because they have so much solar power during the day and they pull in so much fossil fuel energy at night and they want to eliminate that. This is how we can do it.
In my neighborhood too, there's a lot of ag orchard, you know, orchards are constantly being removed and changed out, so you have that as an issue. A lot of times they're dealing with that by chipping. Is ag tree waste or even straw from fields, is that something that fits in with?
That we can torrefy all that, including things like almond husks and those kinds of things as well. We could use those materials.
And open field materials, straw, things like that? So
I don't know about straw so much, but because I think it'd burn too fast. But I think, you know, a woody material would be no problem whatsoever.
And as far as turning into the nanofibers?
Again, nanofibers, you can make it from anything that has cellulose. The question is what's cost effective to make it. And again, we can make it from any kind of an ag byproduct, but it makes most sense out of wood.
Right, okay, very good. Ms. Cover, would you like to touch on any of the?
Now, in terms of, I think for the application for mass timber, you know, we are looking at wood products for the application here.
Right, and Mr. Henry?
I would just say that you need a complete suite of manufacturing, manufactured materials to really incentivize investment in manufacturing in the wood products space. You need something like CLT, dimensional lumber manufacturing, and then you need products like ours that are based on the residuals from those, from the engineering of those materials and from the dimensional sawmills. So yes, sort of, you need all of these products. You need the pellet manufacturing, you need the CLT manufacturing, you need the insulation, and you need to create markets for those in order for the mills to be successful.
Right, long-term markets. Anything you wish to touch on Paradise's problem with, again, hundreds of thousands of dead and charred trees that could be incorporated into this thinking on an more immediate basis too? Yeah,
so we actually participated in a venture competition in California that was supported by the U.S. Endowment for California in terms of finding new innovative ways to take those problem materials and turn them into value-added materials. That was very helpful in terms of our company getting exposure to investors. More things like that need to happen to get these stories out there. This committee is very helpful in terms of our exposure and in terms of all of these types of startup companies that need the exposure to investors, to people who are interested in solving problems in the wood product space.
All right, thank you, panelists. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Maine for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. A couple of more questions, although I could go on all day, so thank you so much. In Maine, we have something called the Mainmast Timber Commercialization Center, and it's an effort to bring some of the stakeholders together to talk about the economic potential of the forest economy. They're currently working on a life cycle analysis to compare cross-laminated timber construction to traditional steel and concrete. I know we've been talking a lot about that today. And I think one of the challenges currently in the marketplace, besides general acceptance by builders and contractors, is also that we don't have a lot of standards right now that talk about carbon sequestration in building materials. But I fully expect, whether it's consumer demand or just that how the codes change, we're going to see a lot more of that. So, Ms. Cover, I'm just interested, you've talked a little bit about that, but do you think this is starting to change, that we're not going to keep overlooking the carbon sequestration benefits? And can you just say a word about why that's so important in CLT?
Yeah, 100%. I think as operational carbon emissions, as we start to get more control over that, embodied carbon is what is really going to be the conversation. We see that shifting with the architectural community quite consistently. And one of the things I think is interesting is in foreign governments, there's been a lot of motivation to really look at that embodied carbon impact. Vancouver, Canada, for instance, set a goal to reduce their embodied carbon in their new buildings by 40% by 2030. And so this is new, this is a shift. People are starting to recognize embodied carbon and the value of reducing that in the built environment. One of the things that may be a suggestion here in the U.S. is to consider benchmarking the carbon that is in the buildings, that federal buildings, for example, that are currently being built, and then set a target on how to decrease that carbon in the embodied.
On a somewhat different topic, but it's related, I know in my state it's related to one of the challenges that you were just mentioning about how you put together the whole package, and have solid lumber and all these other products and make a deal that's interesting to investors. And I don't know exactly how this impacts California and some of the other states, but this deals with the RFS standard, so the Renewable Fuel Standard. And I know in Maine, traditionally, a lot of our paper mill facilities could use some of the byproducts to generate electricity. They were basically burning them. And so when we talk about pellets or other ways to use some of the residuals, it can be an important part of putting the package together. But the way it's currently interpreted in the EPA rule, it's only accessible to plantation-grown trees. So a lot of what people have been talking about today, I don't think is grown on a plantation. That's pretty specific to some southern states. So it really cuts a lot of the forest industry out of this. And I know it's not even under our committee jurisdiction because it's an EPA rule, but do you guys want to make any comments about that? I just think it's maybe important for my colleagues to understand better that it's something maybe we should tackle together because it's really critically important that we have a full package when we're trying to convince investors of this. Maybe you don't want to comment, but.
It's so important, and my colleagues have talked about this before, but that integrated system, right, of all the different products that we're producing from our forests. And these are very low margin businesses. We're not making a lot of money. Most of what we're talking about are really commodity products. The value-added products that Jennifer and Josh are talking about obviously bring more value. But we need those really low-value systems as well so we can take advantage of the whole product because the margins really are not there. So anything that helps and can make a significant impact, and those kinds of incentives really do help us make a go of it all. And so, there are unintended consequences. Don't have to talk to Congress about that. You all know that better than most of us. But, the unintended consequences of adding a word in there, it may be a really good idea in terms of what we're trying to, what we envision. But the on-the-ground consequences are significant. And in this case, cutting off a lot of potential where we could actually have that marginal gain that would make a company actually viable versus four mills in 6 years?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I would go, that's a very good point. I think that those low margins are extremely critical to the base of the manufacturing chain for wood products. The loggers that are in there in the woods, those margins, as Mr. Gorgon explained, are extremely small for them. When something like 2008 happens, when 4 mills close down, that is the first impacted group and the least flexible group in terms of, and so any standards that help to increase their margins, that's really where those small changes go to, and it's an extremely critical link in the chain.
Thank you. I've run out of time, but if any of my colleagues are interested in understanding that standard better, it has been a real challenge for the Maine delegation, and we'd love to work with anyone else who sees it as a potential value for their state. So thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes.
In listening to the discussion, there are some things that this Congress can do. In fact, the 115th Congress, the previous Congress, when we had the majority, we worked on legislation to deal with forest management. Unfortunately, it was entirely partisan. The environmentalists fought it. And so here we are in a situation where we can't seem to agree on what the solution is. But this Congress can do something about forest management. I'd like to hear from y'all. Would you tell this Congress how important that is to get this done and done quickly? So, I'd like to hear it from all three of you on that.
About 1/3 of the country, one-third of the country's forests are at risk of catastrophic either wildfire or insect and disease infestations. We have a significant challenge that we all need to meet together. This is not a partisan issue. This is not environmentalists versus industry. This is a real crisis in our forests that we need to attack. And so the bottom line is we need a suite of solutions that include forest products, that include just flat out management, that include supporting our logging infrastructure, that include supporting family wage jobs in rural America, which you all know how important that is, because a family wage job in rural America is worth about 20 family wage jobs in urban America. This whole suite of solutions needs to be addressed. And we know that we can do this work. It's a question of time and money. And if we actually create the markets, we can start to address some of those money issues. The time issues are a little harder, but we'll get there. I think that Congress can add some significant weight to this conversation, both in terms of reducing, not eliminating, but reducing some of the regulatory burden that makes it harder for the Forest Service to do their job. These are dedicated professionals that are out there managing these forests in pretty significant ways. The private sector does a remarkable job of managing forests. They're not always perfect. Family landowners, sometimes it's hard for them too. The Forest Service has some of the biggest challenges in this country because of the regulatory environment. If we could reduce that burden, it would be helpful, and if we could give them more money, it would be helpful.
Exactly. Any others would like to comment on this?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with Mr. Gorgon. I think some specific tactics that would be helpful to building on what Michael mentioned would be definitely supporting the Forest Service in their ability to support programs like Woodworks and the Wood Innovation Grants. I mean, that really is a catalyst for a lot of companies that are looking at being innovative in this space. I think sort of modeling in your individual states by encouraging projects to be built with mass timber that are the government buildings. In California, there's been a commitment to build 3 government buildings with mass timber, which is a fantastic move to be seen there to show some leadership. Also, in terms of looking at ways to benchmark and then target reduced carbon, embodied carbon in these structures is another approach, as well as competitions. Again, referring to California, because that's my home state, we're about to announce a competition there in that state, that the results of it for a mass timber building competition in the state, and that really motivates folks. We've got 6 amazing projects that are going to be showcased as part of that are trying to really move the dial, and it shows that that's something that wants to be championed by the state locally, and then that really helps architects and engineers want to engage. And then additionally, encouraging local code adoption in each of your states.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that's really important. There's some jurisdictions that are way behind on the codes.
Right, right. Mr. Henry?
I would Second, the adoption of code. I would just point out one example, unfortunately, in our area of a federal building, I believe, which is the main Veterans Home that's being built in Augusta, is being made of steel and concrete, and doesn't have to be.
Augusta, Maine.
It doesn't.
I'm from
not
Augusta, Georgia.
Augusta, Maine.
There are two Augustas in this nation. Yeah, and real quickly, just wanted to add about this, the sawmill problem. It's a trade problem. Timber is one of the largest industries in the state of Georgia. So what do? The Chinese go in the sawmill business, so we start shipping whole logs through the Savannah port to China. Guess who bought our sawmills rather than going out of business? The Canadians, because they have a massive insect infestation problem in their forest because of the problem with management. So they're coming to Georgia now and have bought our sawmills. Can you believe it? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So, but anyway, thank you. It's been great. And yes, Congress needs to act. We need to get this done. There's lots of opportunity. Thank you very much.
I want to thank everyone for a productive hearing today. I especially want to thank our witnesses for their dedication to ensuring our nation's forests continue to drive the rural economy. Federal support for wood products is crucial if we want to ensure the success and sustainability of the industry. And for my part, as a representative from Central Virginia, I will continue to look for ways to shine a light on the great work happening in this industry across the country. I look forward to seeing more of these innovative ideas prosper in the future in this sector. And I am so grateful for the time that you all have spent with us answering our questions. The conversation, I think, has begotten many additional questions, but I have found it to be a really intriguing conversation, and I'm delighted by the work that you all are doing, and I'm grateful for the time that you've spent with us here today. Thank you. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days. To receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member, the hearing of the Subcommittee of Conservation and Forestry is adjourned.